A man in Ohio just finished his last car payment. 5 years of grinding, 5 years of watching that number tick down on his banking app, and now it's done. He's proud. He tells his wife they're finally debt-free. That night, he sleeps better than he has in months. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, a man in Malibu just took out a $40 million loan against his stock portfolio. He has no intention of paying it back. Not next year, not in 10 years, not ever. And his accountant is congratulating him, because that single decision just saved him more in taxes than the Ohio guy will earn in his entire working life. Now here's the part that should make your stomach turn. Both of these men were taught the same lesson growing up. Debt is dangerous. Pay it off as fast as you can. Live below your means. One of them followed that advice to the letter. The other one realized it was a set of instructions written for a game he was never supposed to win. Think about how your money actually moves. You drag yourself out of bed, commute 40 minutes, sit under fluorescent lights for 8 or 9 hours, and at the end of the pay period a number appears in your account, but it's already smaller than what you earned. 24 cents of every dollar, gone before you touch it. Federal taxes, then state maybe, then you take what's left. That already shrunken dollar, and you hand a piece of it to a bank for the privilege of driving a car that was worth less the moment you turned the key. You're paying interest with money that was already taxed on an asset that is actively decaying in your driveway. Run those numbers on a napkin sometime. You bought a $15,000 vehicle. You paid 6% interest over 5 years. But the real cost wasn't 6%. It was 6% on top of the 24% the government already skimmed. And the collateral, that car, lost nearly half its value by year 3. You were underwater before you made your second payment. You just couldn't feel it because the monthly number looked manageable. This is the treadmill, not the poetic kind people talk about in self-help books. A mechanical one, engineered with tax brackets and interest rates, and depreciating assets, calibrated so precisely that you can run on it for 30 years and never move an inch forward. You borrow to buy things that shrink. You repay with income that's already been cut. And every single month the distance between you and actual wealth gets a little wider, not because you're lazy or stupid, but because the math was never in your favor. The system doesn't need you to fail, it just needs you to keep paying. The question you should be asking yourself right now isn't whether this is fair. You already know the answer to that. The real question is why nobody ever walked you through the actual mechanics and what changes once you finally see them. So let's do the math that nobody around you is doing, and I mean actually do it, with real numbers. Because this is where the whole illusion falls apart. Picture someone sitting on $10 million in assets. Stocks, real estate, a business, whatever. They need $500,000 to live on for the year. Normal life, expenses, travel, the usual. Now here's where two completely different realities split off from the same starting point. In the first reality, they do what you and I were taught. They cash out some stocks to cover that $500,000. But the IRS is already waiting at the door. Those shares were bought years ago for less than they're worth today. So the difference between what was paid and what they're worth now counts as profit. Capital gains at a 20% tax rate. Walking away with $500,000 in hand means selling over $600,000 in assets. More than $100,000 just evaporated into a tax bill. Gone. And that's not even the real damage. The real damage is invisible. Those shares they sold will never compound again. Every dollar of future growth those stocks would have generated over the next 10, 20, 30 years is permanently erased. They paid the government over $100,000 for the privilege of touching their own wealth, and they shrunk the machine that was building more of it. Now rewind, same person, same 10 million, same need for 500,000. But in this second reality, they walk into a private bank. They don't sell anything, they slide their balance sheet across the table. The banker sees 10 million in stable, appreciating assets and offers a loan at 3% annual interest. Papers get signed, 500,000 hits their account. No shares sold, no capital gains triggered. The IRS doesn't even register that 500,000 as income. Because borrowed money isn't earned money, it's a loan. The only cost is interest, $15,000 a year, that's it. Meanwhile, that full 10 million is still sitting there, still compounding. If the market returns just 5% that year, those assets grew by 500,000. They borrowed 500,000, their portfolio gained 500,000, and the only price they paid was 15,000 in interest. Net result, they're ahead by $485,000. And they owe zero in capital gains tax. Read those two outcomes side by side. Same person, same wealth, same spending need. One path costs over 100,000 in taxes and permanently kills future growth. The other path costs 15,000 in interest and the wealth machine keeps running untouched. The gap between those two choices isn't small, it's a canyon that gets wider every single year. And this is where the asset selection piece locks the whole thing into place. Banks don't hand out these loans against just anything. Nobody's borrowing millions against a watch collection or a garage full of vintage cars. The collateral has to be stable, easy to price, consistently appreciating, and liquid enough to sell fast if things go sideways. That means publicly traded stocks, prime real estate in strong markets, and businesses with predictable cash flow. Assets the bank can measure, model, and trust. But here's the detail that makes the system nearly bulletproof. You never borrow against all of it. Someone with 50 million in assets doesn't ask for 50 million, they ask for 5, maybe 10. That's a low loan-to-value ratio, and it's the engineering that holds everything together. If the market crashes 30%, 50 million drops to 35 million. The bank loaned 10, they're still completely covered, the borrower is nowhere near default. The math is so far in the bank's favor that the loan barely registers as risk on their books. This is the part that should genuinely bother you. Not because it's illegal, it's perfectly legal, but because the gap between how money works for people who own assets and how it works for people who earn wages is not a gap at all. It's a wall, and most people will spend their entire lives on the wrong side of it without ever understanding why the view looks so different from over there. Picture two people sitting across from the same loan officer at the same bank on the same Tuesday morning. One of them walks out with $10 million at 3% interest. No mandatory principal payments, a decade to figure out the rest. The other one walks out with a 30-year mortgage at 7%, every single payment scheduled down to the penny, and a quiet knot in their stomach that won't go away until 2054. Same institution, same marble lobby, completely different universe of rules. And the thing that separates them isn't intelligence, isn't work ethic, isn't even luck. It's one word: collateral. The person with 30 million in real estate and equities isn't borrowing against a promise to keep showing up at work. They're borrowing against something that already exists on a balance sheet. The bank doesn't care if they get fired, get sick, or sleep until noon every day for the next 10 years. The assets are sitting right there, the bank knows it's getting paid regardless. So the terms reflect that safety, low interest, flexible structure, no rush. Now flip to the other side of the desk, you, borrowing against your future labor. The bank is essentially placing a bet that your body and your employer will cooperate for the next few decades. That's a fragile bet, so they charge you for the risk. Higher rates, rigid schedules, miss 2 payments, and the whole thing starts to collapse. This is the fracture line nobody talks about. It's not that wealthy people are better with money. It's that the financial system literally operates on different physics, depending on what you bring to the table. Assets get you access to cheap, patient capital. Income gets you expensive, impatient capital. And that gap compounds every single year you're alive. Here's where it gets surgical. That person with the $10 million loan at 3%, their only obligation is $300,000 a year in interest. The principal just sits there, untouched, for the entire term. Meanwhile, that 10 million lands in their account and the IRS doesn't blink. It's not income, it's borrowed money, so there's no tax event. They just received $10 million tax-free to spend on whatever they want. Living expenses, new investments, another property. And the only cost is $300,000 a year to keep it alive. Think about what you'd have to do to get $10 million through a paycheck. Even at a high salary, you'd need to earn around $15 million pre-tax, just to clear 10 after the government takes its share. Years of grinding, exposed to income tax at every step. They skipped all of that with a single signature and a portfolio statement. Fast forward 10 years, they've paid $3 million total in interest. The loan is maturing, and this is the moment most people assume the music stops. You owe $10 million, time to pay up, sell something, liquidate, face reality. But that's not what happens, not even close. They walk back into the same bank and refinance. A new $10 million loan replaces the old one. The slate resets, another decade, another $300,000 a year. Why would anyone do this instead of just selling assets and clearing the debt? Because selling is where the trapdoor opens. To raise $10 million in cash after capital gains taxes, you'd need to liquidate 13, maybe 14 million in holdings. That equity is gone forever, every dollar of future growth on those assets, gone. And you just handed the government a multi-million-dollar check for the privilege of paying off a loan you could have just rolled over. Refinancing costs you $300,000 a year. Selling costs you millions in one afternoon. The math isn't even close, and here's the part that makes it almost absurd. Inflation is quietly working in their favor the entire time. That $300,000 annual payment buys less and less every year. They're repaying with dollars that are shrinking in value, while their assets appreciate in dollars that are growing in value. The system isn't neutral, it's actively rewarding the people who already own things, and actively punishing the people who don't. So the next time someone tells you the secret to wealth is working harder, or saving more, ask yourself a different question. What are you actually borrowing against? Your time, or something that grows while you sleep? Because the answer to that question determines which side of the loan officer's desk you're really sitting on. And honestly, I want to know where you stand on this. Drop a comment and tell me, does understanding this make you want to play differently? Or does it just confirm what you already suspected, about how the whole thing is rigged? So now you understand the machinery. You see how the refinancing loop works, how the cushion protects the borrower, how the tax code quietly erases decades of gains the moment a heartbeat stops. And right about now, a very specific feeling is settling in. It feels like watching someone explain a card trick in slow motion, while you're sitting at a table where the deck was never passed to you. Because the honest truth is, you don't have 30 million in assets. You probably don't have 3 million, maybe not even 300,000. And that means the full buy, borrow, die cycle isn't yours to run. Not today, maybe not for a long time. But here's where most people make the mistake that costs them everything. They hear a strategy built for 9-figure balance sheets, and they do one of two things. Either they try to replicate it with money they don't have, which is how you end up over-leveraged and bankrupt. Or they dismiss the entire framework as irrelevant, scroll to the next video, and change absolutely nothing about how they handle their own money. Both reactions leave you in the exact same spot. There is a third option, and it's painfully boring. That's how you know it actually works. Think about what made the whole system function in the first place. It wasn't the loan, it wasn't the bank, it wasn't even the step up in basis. The engine underneath all of it was one thing: assets that compound over time without being sold. Strip away the private bankers, the estate attorneys, the 7-figure credit lines. The core principle is someone bought something productive, refused to touch it, and let time do the work. A diversified index fund doesn't care whether you put in 10 million or $10 a week. The math of compounding is identical. The percentage doesn't know your net worth. So here's the one action, not a strategy, not a plan, not a vision board. One mechanical, repeatable motion you can set up tonight in less than 11 minutes. Open your brokerage account, or open one if you don't have one. Pick a single broad market index fund. Set an automatic recurring purchase for whatever amount doesn't make you flinch. Could be $50, could be 20, could be 10. The number almost doesn't matter right now. What matters is that the transfer happens on the same day every single period. Without you making a decision, without you checking the price, without you reading a headline first. You're removing yourself from the equation. Because you're the most expensive variable in your own financial life. Every time you hesitate, every time you check whether the market is up or down, every time you skip a month because rent was tight, you're doing the opposite of what the people in this video do. They never sell, you keep never starting. Set the automation, then do something harder, ignore it. Don't check the balance on Tuesday. Don't open the app when the market drops 4%. And every notification on your phone is screaming. The families running this strategy didn't build generational wealth by watching a ticker. They built it by making the decision once, and then letting decades of compounding do what decades of compounding always do. Your job is not to be smart about timing. Your job is to be relentlessly boring about consistency. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. That automatic transfer you just set up is going to feel completely pointless for the first year. Maybe the first 3 years, you'll look at your balance and think it's a joke. $50 a week into an index fund isn't going to make you a billionaire. And you're right, it probably won't. But it will do something no amount of financial education can do on its own. It will build the one asset the wealthy already have that you don't. The habit of owning things that grow and never selling them. That habit is the seed. Everything else, the loans, the refinancing, the tax strategies, all of it grows from that one root. Without it, none of the sophisticated machinery even has a surface to attach to. Now I want to know something from you. What's the one thing that stopped you from automating even a small investment until now? Is it the amount feeling too small to matter? Is it not trusting the market? Is it something else entirely? Drop it in the comments, because I have a feeling the thing holding you back is the same thing holding back 90% of the people watching this right now. So now you have the full picture. You watched a dead person's estate settle a $10 million loan by selling assets their heirs inherited at a stepped-up basis, tax-free. And you watched those same heirs pocket the other 10 million, also tax-free, and start the entire cycle over again. Borrow, live, die, reset, generation after generation. The principal never gets repaid by the person who took the loan. It gets absorbed by a tax code that treats death as a clean slate. And right now, sitting wherever you are, you probably feel one of two things. Either a cold clarity like someone just showed you the wiring behind a wall you've been staring at your whole life, or a quiet anger because this machine was never built for you to climb inside. Both reactions are correct, and here's what I owe you before this ends. I owe you honesty about the exit door. If your net worth fits inside a single bank account and a car title, this strategy is not your next move. Trying to replicate what Elon Musk does with his Tesla shares, or what Larry Ellison does with Oracle stock, on a $40,000 salary with no appreciating collateral, is not ambition. It's a fast track to a collections call at 7 in the morning, while you are brushing your teeth. The banks will not offer you 2% interest-only terms. They will hand you a 19% credit card and a minimum payment that barely covers the interest. That's not the same game. That's a different sport played on a different field with a different scoreboard. So what do you actually do with everything you just learned? You do the smallest thing first. You stop treating your paycheck as the finish line and start treating ownership as the starting gun. That doesn't mean you go buy a rental property tomorrow with money you do not have. It means you look at the next $500 that lands in your account and ask a question you have probably never asked before. Can this buy me a piece of something that grows while I sleep? An index fund share, a fractional position in an asset class you actually understand. Something with a pulse, something that compounds. Something that one day, maybe 15 years from now, a bank looks at and says, we will lend against that. That's the survival buffer, not a promise that you will wake up rich. Not a fantasy about borrowing against a portfolio you do not have yet. Just a single shift in direction, 1 degree on the compass. Over 10 years, 1 degree turns into a completely different destination. You're not going to out-earn this system, nobody does. But you can stop feeding it your entire paycheck and start, even at a microscopic level, building something it has to respect. Now I want to hear from you. What's the one thing that actually changed in how you see debt after watching this? Drop it in the comments, not what you think you should say, what actually shifted.